July 10th, 2026. A rail line that runs through the heartland of a geopolitical alliance stretching from Tehran to Beijing to Moscow, a supply corridor that took years to build, billions of dollars to finance, and represents one of the most strategically consequential pieces of infrastructure in the entire Eurasian landmass, no longer exists. Not severed, not damaged, gone. A U.S. strike took it out, and the moment that bridge collapsed into rubble, the Islamic Republic of Iran lost something that no ballistic missile salvo, no matter how large, no matter how many launchers are activated simultaneously, can replace before the current military campaign reaches its conclusion. The resupply line is cut, the weapons pipeline is severed, and Iran is now fighting a war in which it is firing through an inventory that cannot be replenished at the rate the conflict is consuming it. But that bridge is not even the most alarming part of the story unfolding as of this moment on July 10th, 2026. Because while the rail infrastructure was being cut, something else was happening simultaneously that changes the fundamental character of this conflict in ways that have not yet been fully absorbed by anyone watching from the outside. Iran launched back, massively. Ballistic missiles from northwestern Iran, from Urmia in the western Azerbaijan province, from the Iraq missile field in Markazi province. Multiple launch points, multiple salvos, missiles in the air simultaneously, over Jordan, over Iraq, over positions hosting American forces. And at the same moment, U.S. cruise missiles, Tomahawks, were confirmed striking the Bushehr nuclear power plant in southern Iran. Both things happening at once. Iran firing its largest counterattack of the current phase. America striking a nuclear facility with cruise missiles. The escalation is not theoretical anymore. It is operational, it is simultaneous, and it is unfolding right now. But let's back all the way up, because to understand what Iran's missile counterattack means, what it reveals about Iranian capability, Iranian intent, and the strategic position the Islamic Republic now finds itself in, you need to understand the full sequence of what has been building over the last 48 hours, and why the decisions being made on both sides right now are not improvised responses to unexpected developments. They are the execution of plans that were drawn up weeks ago and have been waiting for exactly this moment. The United States military's current campaign against Iran began with a clear and publicly stated objective: degrade Iran's ability to threaten freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. That framing, maritime security, protection of commercial shipping, defense of innocent civilian mariners, was the official justification for the opening strikes. It was credible as a justification because the IRGC's systematic harassment of commercial vessels in the Strait had been ongoing and escalating for months. Seizures, drone swarms, mining operations, direct threats against civilian crews. The Islamic Republic had been weaponizing the most strategically important waterway on Earth as a tool of coercive leverage, and the United States military decided, at the command level, that the era of absorbing those provocations with measured diplomatic responses was over. That decision produced the opening strikes, approximately 90 targets in the first confirmed operational window: air defense systems, coastal surveillance infrastructure, missile and drone storage sites, naval capabilities, railway bridges in Golestan province, an IRGC airport, a port traffic control tower, and then, in the most recent operational wave, the nuclear city of Bushehr, power plants across the southern region, drone production facilities, the IRGC's main naval base in the Bushehr province, and now, confirmed by Iranian state media itself, a direct cruise missile strike on the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Iran looked at that campaign and made a choice: not to absorb it, not to seek a diplomatic off-ramp, not to signal restraint in the hope of de-escalation. Iran chose to fire back with the largest ballistic missile counterattack of the current phase of the conflict. And that choice, made under conditions of degraded military infrastructure, degraded command and control architecture, and a rapidly narrowing strategic window, tells you everything you need to know about the actual decision-making logic inside the Islamic Republic's leadership right now. The Iranian counterattack launched within the last operational window involved ballistic missiles, fired from multiple geographic locations inside Iran simultaneously. Markazi province in northwestern Iran, the Iraq missile field, with visible trails of ballistic missiles captured in footage distributed through Iranian and regional media channels. At least 5 ballistic missiles launched from northwestern Iran on trajectories toward the Prince Hassan Air Base in Jordan, a facility that is jointly operated by United States and Royal Jordanian Air Force personnel. This is a significant target choice. Prince Hassan is not a marginal military installation. It is an active U.S. military facility on the territory of an Arab nation that has been carefully managing its public relationship with the Iran conflict. And targeting it is a direct signal that the IRGC is willing to expand the conflict geographically into Jordanian territory, regardless of Jordan's nominal neutrality in the current exchange. 8 additional launchers were spotted in activation mode, indicating that the salvos already fired were not the full extent of the launch operation, and that further waves were being prepared simultaneously. Multiple ballistic missiles were also launched from Urmia in western Azerbaijan province in northwestern Iran, adding another geographic node to the launch picture and demonstrating that the IRGC's northwestern launch infrastructure, despite weeks of sustained American strikes on missile sites across the country, retains operational capability. Iran was not limiting its counterattack to ballistic missiles. Warning sirens were activated at Camp Victory near Baghdad International Airport, a U.S. military position inside Iraq. Explosions were reported in Erbil, the Kurdish Autonomous Region's capital, where American consulate facilities and U.S.-affiliated installations are located. The IRGC extended the geographic scope of its counterattack simultaneously in multiple directions, Jordan to the west, Iraq to the northwest, attempting to stretch American air defense and force protection resources across the widest possible geographic front at the same time. Read that tactical picture carefully, because it reveals both what Iran is attempting and exactly how constrained its options are. Firing from multiple geographic nodes simultaneously is the correct tactical approach, if your objective is to saturate air defense systems that are optimized for threats from a single vector. Spreading launches across Markazi province, western Azerbaijan province, and potentially other locations forces air defense batteries to engage threats from multiple bearings simultaneously rather than sequentially, which theoretically degrades intercept efficiency. This is not an improvised response. It is planned. The targeting of Prince Hassan in Jordan, Camp Victory near Baghdad, Erbil, these are coordinated target choices designed to maximize the geographic stress on American force protection posture across the entire theater. Iran has a plan. That plan is being executed. The question is whether the plan is producing effects at a scale that alters the strategic balance, and the honest answer to that question, based on everything confirmed so far, is that it is not. Intercept activity was visible over Jordan. Smoke plumes from interceptor missiles, attempting to engage incoming Iranian ballistic missiles, multiple interceptors in the air simultaneously. The intercept picture from the current operational window follows the same pattern as every previous Iranian salvo in this conflict. The United States and its partners are absorbing the launches, engaging them with air defense, and continuing offensive operations without interruption. This is the most strategically significant fact about Iran's massive counterattack. It is massive in the sense that it represents the largest Iranian missile salvo of the current phase. It is not massive in the sense of producing irreversible changes to American military capability in the theater. And that gap between the scale of effort Iran is expending and the strategic effect that expenditure is producing is the defining feature of the Iranian military situation right now. Which brings us back to the rail bridge, because the destruction of that specific piece of infrastructure is not just a military strike. It is the single most consequential operational decision in the current campaign, and it is receiving a fraction of the analytical attention it deserves. The rail line that has now been severed connected Iran through Turkmenistan to China and through a separate branch to Russia. This is not a civilian commercial rail route that happens to pass through Iranian territory. This is a dedicated supply corridor that has been functioning as the primary land-based resupply channel for Iranian military imports throughout the conflict. New air defense components, missile systems, technical hardware, the materials and equipment that the IRGC depends on to regenerate capability after each round of American strikes. Iran confirmed the strike on this bridge itself through state media, which is notable because the Iranian government has been consistent about not confirming American military successes unless the evidence is undeniable. The confirmation means the bridge is gone, and the regime knows the international strategic community needs to understand that it is gone. Now think about what cutting that supply line means in practical operational terms. Russia retains access to Iran through the Caspian Sea. That route has not been severed, and it remains a viable channel for Russian-sourced military supplies, but Chinese resupply through the land route is no longer possible. For Chinese military hardware, components, technical systems, dual-use materials, to reach Iran now, it would have to arrive by air. Consider what that means. Chinese military transport aircraft flying into Iranian airspace while American aircraft are conducting active strike operations across Iranian territory simultaneously. The risk calculus for that kind of resupply mission is prohibitive. Not impossible in theory, but operationally extraordinary in the current environment. The practical effect of cutting the rail bridge to China is that Chinese military resupply to Iran has been functionally suspended for the duration of active American strike operations. And suspending Chinese resupply at exactly the moment when Iran's missile inventory is being consumed faster than it can be regenerated through domestic production is a compounding strategic disaster for the Islamic Republic. The Iranian F-5 fighter spotted near Mashhad, captured in footage showing it coming in and landing, is a detail worth more analytical attention than it has received. Iran's air force is not a credible factor in this conflict at the level of capability required to contest American air superiority over Iranian territory. The F-5 is a second-generation light fighter with origins in the 1960s. Against F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs, it presents no meaningful air combat threat. The reason the IRGC has been scrambling whatever fighter aircraft remain in operational condition is not tactical. It is symbolic and psychological, a signal to the domestic audience that the Iranian military is not simply absorbing American strikes passively, that something is being done, that the Air Force is responding. But the operational reality is that Iranian fighter aircraft cannot protect Iranian airspace from American strike packages. They cannot intercept cruise missiles. They cannot engage stealth aircraft operating at the altitudes and with the electronic warfare support that American missions in this theater are conducted with. The scrambled F-5s are a propaganda asset, not a military one. And the fact that Iranian state media is publicizing their activity while American cruise missiles are simultaneously striking the Bushehr nuclear facility tells you everything about the gap between the narrative being constructed for domestic consumption and the operational reality on the ground. 10 million barrels of oil rushed to sea. This single data point, reported this morning, is one of the most revealing indicators of the Iranian leadership's actual strategic assessment of their current situation. Iran moved 10 million barrels of oil out of its coastal storage and port infrastructure and onto sea-based tankers in the hours after. Reports emerged that the United States Navy was considering a resumed program of oil tanker seizures. 10 million barrels is not a precautionary measure. It is a panicked, logistical maneuver executed under time pressure by a government that assessed a credible threat to its most important remaining revenue source and decided to act immediately to protect that revenue. Iran's oil exports have been operating through a shadow fleet of tankers that navigate international sanctions through ship-to-ship transfers, flags of convenience, and falsified documentation. If the United States Navy resumes the systematic seizure of Iranian oil tankers that it conducted in earlier phases of the conflict, that revenue stream, already constrained, already the subject of international sanctions, takes another devastating blow at exactly the moment when the military campaign is consuming resources at an accelerating rate. The rush to move 10 million barrels to sea before seizures can begin is the economic equivalent of the IRGC scrambling F-5 fighters over Mashhad. It is a reactive measure taken under pressure that reveals the depth of the strategic anxiety inside the Iranian government more clearly than any official statement. Now consider the three simultaneous pressure tracks bearing down on the Islamic Republic at this precise moment, because their convergence is what makes this phase of the conflict categorically different from any previous confrontation in the decades-long cycle of US-Iran antagonism. The military track. Iran is absorbing the largest sustained American strike campaign in the history of the US-Iran conflict across a target set that now includes its nuclear power infrastructure, its rail supply lines to China and Russia, its naval bases, its drone production facilities, its air defense network, its ballistic missile launch sites, its port infrastructure across multiple coastal provinces, and its power generation capacity in the southern part of the country. The American military has stated formally that the strikes will continue and that successive waves will be larger than the ones before. The air campaign is being conducted with air superiority that Iranian air defense is currently unable to meaningfully contest. Iran is firing ballistic missiles in response. Some reach their targets, many are intercepted. The exchange rate is asymmetric in America's favor, and it becomes more asymmetric with each operational wave because Iran's inventory is being consumed faster than the severed supply line can replenish it. The economic track. The rail bridge to China is down. 10 million barrels of oil are being rushed to sea in anticipation of tanker seizures. Port infrastructure at Chabahar and Bandar Abbas has been struck. Power plants in the south have been hit, producing confirmed outages across a region critical to the IRGC's operational logistics. An economy already operating under maximum international sanctions pressure is now additionally under active military attack on its energy and transportation infrastructure simultaneously. The financial runway available to the Islamic Republic to sustain a prolonged conflict is shrinking at the same rate that the military campaign is expanding. The psychological track. Across Iran's population, a population that has lived under 47 years of revolutionary governance, has absorbed decades of economic hardship produced by the regime's foreign policy choices, has watched IRGC forces suppress internal protests with lethal force, and has been told repeatedly that the Islamic Republic's military strength guarantees their security, the visible, undeniable evidence of IRGC military facilities burning, nuclear power plants being struck by cruise missiles, and a rail bridge connecting them to their most important economic partners being cut, is producing a recalibration of the regime's fundamental legitimacy claim. The IRGC's claim to authority rests on a foundation of security provision. It says, "We protect you, we are strong, the enemies cannot reach us." Every burning installation, every blacked-out southern province, every rail bridge that no longer exists is evidence against that claim. Simultaneously, across the region, in the Gulf states, in Jordan and Turkey, and every country that has been calculating its relationship to Iranian military power, the psychological effect of watching the IRGC absorb this scale of military degradation without being able to meaningfully alter the operational picture is a permanent downward revision of the deterrent value that the IRGC's military capabilities have accumulated over decades. Go deeper into the command structure making decisions on the Iranian side, because the public statements emerging from Tehran and the IRGC's communications channels are telling a very different story from the operational reality, and understanding that gap is essential to assessing what comes next. The "We Will Kill Trump" banner hung in Mashhad, and the existence of a formal Iranian assassination target list that places the American president at the top represents the IRGC's attempt to operate a psychological pressure campaign against American leadership at the same time its military assets are being systematically destroyed. The kill list is real. The threat to American leadership is real enough that it affected the operational security protocols for Air Force One's departure from Turkey. Passengers and media ordered to close their window blinds, a precaution that is not standard procedure, and that indicates an assessed threat serious enough to modify flight security behavior. The President of the United States confirming that he is, in his words, number one on the Iranian kill list, and doing so publicly and directly, is not a diplomatic crisis moment. It is a confirmation that the IRGC's assassination program, the same program that has targeted former American officials, military figures, and civilian analysts, has been elevated in this conflict to include the current commander-in-chief. That confirmation changes the psychological and security architecture of the conflict in ways that extend far beyond military operations. An adversary that is willing to attempt to assassinate a sitting American president has made a calculation about acceptable risk that goes beyond conventional military logic. It suggests a leadership that has either assessed it has nothing to lose, that the survival of the regime is already at stake and therefore extreme measures are justified, or that it believes the kill list and assassination threat can function as a deterrent that prevents the American president from authorizing further military escalation. The second interpretation is almost certainly wrong. The history of how American presidents respond to credible assassination threats from foreign state actors does not support the conclusion that such threats produce restraint. They produce the opposite. They produce a political environment in which restraint looks like weakness and escalation can be justified as self-defense. The IRGC's kill list and the "We Will Kill Trump" banner in Mashhad are not strategic assets. They are evidence of a regime that has run out of sophisticated options and is reaching for the most extreme ones in its toolkit. That is not the behavior of an organization that believes it is winning. The intelligence briefing at 1:1 p.m. that was confirmed delivered to the president in the current operational window is not a routine update. When a commander-in-chief receives a formal intelligence briefing at a specific confirmed time while active military operations are underway, it means the National Security Council and military chain of command have determined that the strategic picture has changed in ways that require presidential-level decision-making. The Bushehr nuclear power plant cruise missile strikes, the severed rail bridge, the Iranian counterattack against Prince Hassan in Jordan and American positions in Iraq, the oil tanker seizure intelligence, the kill list confirmation, the readiness assessment of 8 additional Iranian launch platforms being activated. All of that information feeds into a single briefing, and the decision that comes out of that briefing determines the next operational wave. U.S. officials had already told major news outlets that the American military is prepared for a prolonged conflict, a sustained return to active fighting against Iran without a defined endpoint. That is the operational mandate within which the president is being briefed and within which the next decision will be made. The honest strategic assessment of where this conflict stands on July 10, 2026 looks like this. Iran has launched its largest ballistic missile counterattack of the current phase. It has targeted American military facilities in Jordan and Iraq simultaneously. It has confirmed the loss of a rail bridge connecting its supply lines to China and Russia. It has watched American cruise missiles strike the Bushehr nuclear facility. It has rushed oil to sea in anticipation of resumed tanker seizures. Its fighter aircraft are flying patrols over its own territory that cannot meaningfully affect the air campaign being conducted against it. Its kill list has been publicly confirmed and is being discussed by the American president in terms that suggest it is accelerating rather than deterring American military action. And the formal American position is that the strikes will continue to get larger and that the United States is prepared for a conflict of prolonged duration. What the mainstream coverage is not saying clearly enough is this. The Iranian counterattack, for all its geographic breadth and all the psychological weight of missiles in the air over Jordan and sirens at American bases in Iraq, has not altered the fundamental military balance of this conflict. The United States military's ability to conduct strike operations over Iranian territory has not been degraded. The campaign architecture has not been disrupted. The target list has not been shortened. The operational tempo has not been reduced. Iran has spent ballistic missiles, finite, irreplaceable inventory, and produced intercept activity over Jordan and alarm at American positions in Iraq. That is the actual exchange. American strikes are removing Iranian military infrastructure permanently and at scale. Iranian strikes are producing temporary operational alerts and consuming inventory that cannot be replaced now that the rail bridge to China is gone. The structural risk that keeps serious analysts focused on a single variable right now is not the next Iranian missile salvo, large as it may be. It is the Bushehr nuclear facility. A U.S. cruise missile strike confirmed by Iranian state media itself as having hit the Bushehr nuclear power plant is an event with implications that extend far beyond the current conflict. It extends to the Non-Proliferation Treaty framework. It extends to Russia, whose technical personnel have been embedded at that facility and who have explicitly warned against strikes on it. It extends to China, which has maintained a complex relationship with Iranian nuclear development, and which is now watching a facility associated with that development absorb American cruise missile strikes, while its own land supply route to Iran has been simultaneously cut. The triangular relationship between the United States, Russia, and China around the Iranian nuclear question was already under maximum stress before tonight. Strikes on the Bushehr nuclear plant add a dimension to that stress that is without modern precedent. What Russia does in the next 72 hours, not militarily but diplomatically, in terms of its support for Iranian military resupply through the Caspian Sea, in terms of what it says publicly and what it does privately through its military and intelligence channels, will determine whether the current conflict remains bilateral between the United States and Iran, or begins to acquire the characteristics of a proxy confrontation with a much larger set of actors. The Iranian kill list is a window into the psychological state of a regime under maximum pressure. The ballistic missiles over Jordan are a window into the operational state of a military that is still capable of generating threat output but consuming irreplaceable inventory to do so. The rail bridge that no longer exists is a window into the strategic state of an adversary whose resupply options are narrowing with each operational wave. And the cruise missiles over Bushehr are a window into the scope of what the United States military has been authorized to do. A scope that has expanded with each successive operational wave to encompass targets that months ago would have been considered untouchable thresholds. The thresholds are moving. They are moving in one direction. And every actor in the region and beyond who thought they understood where those thresholds were is now recalculating. The missiles are still in the air. The cruise missiles are still flying. The rail bridge is rubble. The supply line is cut. The nuclear facility has been struck. And somewhere in Iran, 8 ballistic missile launchers identified as being in activation mode are either still being readied or have already fired, adding to the incoming threat picture that American and Allied air defense batteries are managing in real time right now. This is not a conflict that is approaching a natural pause. This is a conflict in which every operational decision by both sides is expanding the scope, raising the stakes, and removing the buffers that previously made de-escalation possible without either side absorbing an unacceptable loss of face or capability. The train line from Tehran to Beijing through the Central Asian corridor that represents one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects of the 21st century geopolitical landscape is severed somewhere in its Iranian segment. Trains that were carrying the hardware of Iranian military regeneration, the components, the systems, the materials that allow a military organization to continue fighting after absorbing strikes of the scale the IRGC has absorbed, can no longer reach their destination. They are stopped at a break in the line that no repair crew can reach while the bombing continues. And when the bombing continues, as the American military has formally stated it will, at increasing scale with each successive wave, the break in the line gets wider with every passing day. The supply doesn't come in, the inventory doesn't get replenished, the launchers fire what they have. And the missiles in the air over Jordan right now, trailing fire through a sky lit by interceptors racing upward to meet them, are not an unlimited resource. They are a countdown. Every one that launches is one fewer that can launch tomorrow. And tomorrow, based on everything that has been confirmed, authorized, and stated by the United States military's command structure, the American campaign will be larger than it was today. That asymmetry has a terminal point, and the rail bridge that now lies in rubble means the terminal point is closer than the IRGC's commanders, watching those missiles arc upward from their launch vehicles in the darkness of northwestern Iran, have the inventory to prevent.